So, good afternoon. Welcome to the Subcommittee on International Human Rights. Today, we will be doing an update on the study that we have been doing on the human rights situation in Burundi and Rwanda. Conformément à la motion adoptée par le
Pursuant to the standing order adopted on the 16th of June, the subcommittee is going to resume its study on the situation of human rights in Burundi. We have two witnesses today. First, Armel Nyongere, a lawyer and president of Christians Against Torture and Human Rights Violations. We also have Pacifique Nini Nahazwe, the president of the Forum for Conscious Development. I'd like to thank our witnesses for their persistence and their devotion to the cause of human rights.
Video conference with our two witnesses, but due to the technical issues between here and Africa, we do have them just on teleconference. What this means is that the interpretation will likely be subsequent as opposed to during the interpretation. They will summarize the answers, so please wait, and the interpreters will then, it will kick in. The other thing is that pour les témoins, s'il vous plaît.
And for the witnesses, please, just state your name when you begin to speak, as we don't have the video. So it's important for us to know who's speaking.
So that we know who is speaking. And they will be speaking in French, so please do wait for the interpretation if you require interpretation. Also, because we don't have witnesses, you know that we are televised, and the televised will be the entire room, so just be aware of that as well. Alors, nous allons commencer avec notre premier témoin.
Let's start with our first witness, Armel Nyongere. Please start, Mr. Nyongere. Thank you very much. My name is Armel Nyongere. I am a lawyer. And I am president of the Federation of Christians for the Abolition of Torture in Burundi, as well as the director of SOS Torture Burundi. I'm also a lawyer representing victims before the International Criminal Court. We're talking about 1,600 families of victims that have appeared. I am one of the defense lawyers for the civil parties. You have 10 minutes. Very good. I will speak about the political impasse that is happening in the country. I want to discuss the failure of the fifth and last round of inter-Burundian negotiations, which has left Burundi in a political impasse and may plunge it into violence as the sole method of political expression. I would also like to discuss the context and the human rights violations in Burundi. I have provided documentation on the cruel and unusual punishments, forced disappearance, torture, and other human rights violations. Because I have a great deal of information on this. I'm also going to speak a bit about extrajudicial executions that have occurred. I will also speak about some of the reactions of the political authorities in the country, including the case of the president of the country. At the last round of the negotiations, these were planned for the 24th to the 29th of October 2018. It led to a political a dead end and may lead to an increase in violence as the only method of political expression. I'd also like to discuss the fact that the Burundian government has ultimately boycotted the work by the various political parties. They did not appear at the last round of negotiations. Ultimately, opposition members met. They stated that the only point on the agenda should be the roadmap signed in the north of Burundi at the beginning of August 2018 for the 2020 elections, a document that was approved by about 20 political parties. They are insisting on the respect of an agreement which aims for a return to peace and security in Burundi. We must focus on holding open and transparent elections in 2020 and ensure that civil society organizations that have currently had their operations suspended be restored. The East African community has continued to respond to the situation, and this constitutes an important element of the political and security situation. Despite the narratives of hate and violence during the electoral process. I'd like to discuss a few illustrative examples. You will see the photos that I sent to the clerk of the committee. They are some examples of violations of human rights in 2018. This year has been a period during which many human rights violations have been committed by the party in power, by the national police, and by the Imbonerakure militia, as well as some parts of the FDRL party, which it took power in 1994. The militia has taken over the Burundian territory and is constantly trampling human rights. So up to October of this year, there have been more cases of human rights violations than in the three previous years. Or rather, they have the same characteristics as in the 3 previous years. In fact, we have made a list of 182 murders, 571 arbitrary arrests, 91 cases of torture, 24 forced disappearances, and 27 cases of sexual violence. These various cases of abuse have been committed by the police, the National Intelligence Service, and parts of the Imbonerakure militia who benefit from a situation of total impunity. These examples illustrate the unlimited power of these Imbonerakure militia members. They control the territory. Moreover, officers of the police and the National Intelligence Service are constantly committing all sorts of human rights abuse. And in many cases, this has led to the death of victims or to severe effects on their health. So there are many examples of these various acts of torture that have led to death. For an iconic case is that of Simon Bizimana. He was a young man from the Sendajuru commune in the Kankuto province. He was murdered because he refused to be added to the list to vote in the constitutional referendum in May 2018, stating as a reason his religious beliefs. He died in the hospital of Kankuso on the 17th of March 2018. 1 month earlier, on the 14th of February 2018, he was arrested by Mak Nimpa, the chief police of Gizoro, and was and underwent interrogation in the police station. He was then led into the woods and struck with a cement rod and his Bible by the administrator of Senda Juru, Beatrice Nibaruta. The next day, after another torture section administered by the same individual, with blood running from his ears and nostrils, the young man was brought to the headquarters of the province, or to the largest city, by the provincial intelligence agency head, Bonaventure Nyonkuru. And you can find more details about Mr. Bizimana's case in our report. Then there are also examples of torture that led to grave results. On the 15th of September 2018, Alexis Nibizi, the secretary of the party in power, CNDD-FDD, as well as members of the militia, violently tortured Elias Yamuremye on Rugajo Hill in the Cibitoke province. The victim was the vice representative of the opposition party, the FNL. The local party in power, or the party in power's local representative, CNDD-FDD party, told him that he had refused to adhere to that party, and that was why he was tortured. He had to be evacuated by a local health center for intensive care. And once again, you can find examples of this in the report number 145. Now, cases of forced disappearance. I won't go too much further into this area, but since the beginning of the crisis, Burundi is characterized by numerous cases of forced disappearance. Some of these disappearances could have a political basis. Young people often disappear, but anyone else who is considered as an adversary. People from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. I'm sorry, it's already been 10 minutes. Could you please wrap up your speech soon? Because you can also add things during the question period. There has also been cases of sexual violence. Rape has become very common in Burundi, and there is almost no age limit to this atrocity. It happens to young children as well as elderly individuals. And if you look at my presentation, you will see more details of individual cases. And finally, I'd just like to mention the narrative of hate, which poisons the political discourse. At a meeting for the official launch of a period of awareness raising about the new constitution last year in December, the president menaced political opponents. And that is not the only case. I'm sorry, Mr. Nyongere, but we must now move on. We are now going to move on with Mr. Nini Natshauswe, and you can add your comments during the question period. Next witness, Pacifique Nina Hazwe. Please go ahead. 10 minutes. Members of the committee, it's an honor for me to speak to you about the situation in my country, Burundi. This occasion is particularly important for me because I don't have the right to speak before the parliament of my own country. Because I am committed to defending human rights in Burundi, I have been called a criminal and a traitor to my country. Like all of the main human rights defense organizations, my organization, FOCODE, has been outlawed in Burundi. The bank accounts of both my organization and my personal accounts have been seized. An international arrest warrant has been issued against me, as well as against the other leaders of the main human rights defense organizations in Burundi. Luckily, these frivolous arrest warrants have not been considered to be founded by the international community. And, like other defenders of human rights, I am one of 500,000 Burundians who have had to flee the country because of a regime that refuses to listen to any dissenting voice. I would like to seize this opportunity to thank the Subcommittee on International Human Rights of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development of the House of Commons of Canada for the interest that it has bestowed on the political crisis which has been causing turmoil in my country since April 2015. A crisis caused by President Pierre Nkurunziza, who violated the Constitution of Burundi of March 2015 and the Arusha Accord for Peace and Reconciliation in Burundi from 2000 by running for a third mandate. We have always greatly appreciated the reports and recommendations of this subcommittee. The organization of further debates and hearings on the Burundi situation enables us to keep the country on the agenda of the international community at a time when the Burundian authorities are trying to sweep it under the rug and are saying that everything is fine. The situation in Burundi has been getting worse since April 2015, and no solution is currently visible. With regard to security, the country seems to be going through a period of increased calm since weapons have ceased to be used in Bujumbura. We are no longer seeing corpses littering the streets of the capital like we did at the beginning of the crisis. However, many individuals, particularly opponents to the current president's regime, continue to be disappeared. And the police and justice system do nothing to investigate these disappearances. The only thing that has changed is the modus operandi of these crimes. Kidnappings have become more discreet. Extrajudicial executions are done in secret. Corpses are thrown into lakes or into ditches that are guarded by the Imbonerakure militia. The Burundian public is living in a state of generalized fear. They are controlled by the militia, which has now managed to grasp almost all the powers that should be the purview of police. We haven't yet completely been able to set aside the risk of civil war, as various attacks have recently occurred in the northwest of Burundi, caused by the Red Tabara movement. Now, politically, the Burundian authorities are increasingly trying to muzzle the opposition, as well as civil society organizations and most independent media. Last May, President Nkurunziza adopted by referendum, a new constitution, which enabled him to avoid applying certain provisions of the Arusha Accord. He has announced that he will not be a candidate in 2020. But nothing is now stopping him from staying in power until 2034. The new constitution would also enable him to create a monarchy. And in order to try to avoid possible proceedings under the ICC, to state that no Burundian can be extradited. This constitution, as another witness said, has been adopted in a climate of terror and without any international independent observation. And now, with regard to human rights, severe human rights violations have continued. As stated in the last report of the United Nations investigation, which mentions crimes against humanity, such as assassinations, extrajudicial executions, torture, rape, forced disappearance, and so on. Moreover, this same commission denounced a hate speech or a speech full of hate speech given by the highest authorities in Burundi, including the president. However, the Burundian authorities continue to deny everything. In fact, they have threatened to leave the Human Rights Council, have called the president of the investigating commission names, such as son of a of a slave trafficker. Burundi had already left the Statute of Rome after the first report of the Commission in September 2017. Now I will talk about the socioeconomic situation. The Burundian economy is in a shambles, and the population is living in the most infamous state of poverty. However, the regime is still managing to totter on thanks to funds that it is receiving from peace missions in Somalia and Central African Republic. These missions have enabled the regime to encourage and to make more loyal some of the most extreme elements in the population. It has managed to get money to pay off the militia and to limit fluctuations in the Burundian exchange rate. So we are in a paradoxical situation. On the one hand, Burundi is funding missions that stabilize other countries, and at the same time, a bloody dictatorship continues to exist in Burundi. With this in mind, organizations for the defense of human rights are continuing to document human rights violations in the country. Most of these organizations have to work from exile, but they have an excellent level of connections with the population, and there is a network of observers that has existed for several years. The United Nations Commission, as well as the investigation of the ICC, are founded on the documentation provided by these organizations. And I believe that these human rights organizations deserve more support from the international community. As an illustration, my organization, FOCODE, has been working on documenting cases of forced disappearance since April 2016. Before we started working on this, the matter of forced disappearances was practically absent from the narrative on Burundi. Families told us that they had been arrested by the security services, but that this was not recorded in official files. They were paralyzed by fear of reprisal. So these families didn't know how to speak up about the situation, but they were traumatized by an unlivable dilemma: to continue to look for their near and dear, or to just start mourning them, assuming that they were dead. On the 28th of April 2016, FOCODE started a campaign against forced disappearance in Burundi. The campaign is called Nondeza, which is a Kirundi word which means "help me find my near and dear." Since then, FOCODE has documented 91 cases of disappearance out of 300 cases submitted by families. And these documented cases are regularly posted on our website, and they have the identity of the disappeared individuals as well as the circumstances. Most of the victims are former demonstrators against the third mandate of the president, or supporters of opposition parties, soldiers from the former army or former rebel movements, human rights defenders, journalists, civil society activists, and occasionally members of the current militia who might wish to bear witness against the crimes of the regime. And the agencies that are the most involved in these disappearances are the National Police, the Secret Service, the Army, and the Imbonerakure militia. Unfortunately, the Burundian authorities never have anything to say publicly about these disappearances. Members of the committee, I have painted a very dark portrait of the situation. We don't know what to do to get out of the crisis. What can Canada do to help in such a terrible situation? It is very important, firstly, to ensure that Burundi maintains a place in the attention of the international community. Canada will soon be part of the United Nations Security Council, and we are hoping that it will push the Council to continue to maintain pressure on the Burundian authorities. Solving this crisis cannot happen, secondly, unless there is real negotiation between the various political parties. The Burundi government has boycotted the 5th round of the Inter-Burundian dialogue, and the East Africa community has failed to get the government and opposition to sit down together, despite 3 years of work. We need to ensure that the dialogue process be taken in hand by the United Nations and the African Union, and that if effective pressure measures be taken against any party that tries to undermine the dialogue. And I would like to mention one of the recommendations that was made in your recent report. You stated that targeted sanctions should be made against the Burundian authorities. specifically freezing assets and preventing them from traveling to Canada. Now, thirdly, the solution to the crisis should be founded on the 2000 Arusha Accord and should categorically reject the new constitution proposed by Pierre Nkurunziza. Fourth, the dissolution of the Imbonerakure militia, the protection of exiled leaders, the recovery of public freedoms like independent media and civil society, the reform of the defense and security forces, as well as the repatriation of refugees. These are all key elements to ensure that the situation can return to normality. And fifthly, any solution to this crisis must avoid leaving international crimes in a state of impunity. We must respect the process before the ICC and ensure that the process leads to the construction of an independent legal system that can judge these severe crimes. I'm so sorry, but it's already been 12 minutes, so we will just start our question period.
7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much to both of our witnesses. I wanted to just first start with our first witness. There may have been a translation issue, but at one point you said that the incidents of violence, I thought you said they were escalating, but I also heard what it sounded like they were at a steady state. So can I just get confirmation? Has there been an escalation in the level of violence in the past 6 months to a year?
That would be for our mill.
Yes.
Oui.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, in the current situation, based on the data that we have, up to October, we do find that the situation has gotten worse. Especially given the hateful narrative that is put forward by people like the president, including the Speaker of the Senate and other important individuals in the government. Ultimately, they encourage crimes against opposition members. The highest authorities of the country and intelligence services are organizing, and that has led to an increase in human rights violations. I would also like to refer to the recent report of the Commission of Inquiry, which states that in Burundi there have been crimes against humanity, due in part to the types of remarks made by the type of statements that are made by the high authorities in the country, including the president. It shows that something is being prepared and they're preparing to act against human rights, and that's why we would ask the international community, including Canada, to take steps to protect the Burundian population.
To our second witness, Mr. Nining Haswe, I wanted to ask, you have a website on which you have an index of people who are the victims of forced disappearance. I wondered, number one, if you could repeat to us the website address, and number two, if you could tell us, you indicate that you have 91 individuals recorded out of 300, roughly 300 that you know of. Over what time period have the 300 disappearances taking place? Is that over the entire 3-year period since 2015, or is it over a shorter period?
Merci.
Thank you for the question. The address of our campaign is www.ndondeza.org. NDONDEZA. And that's where you can find the cases that we have documented during our campaign against these forced disappearances. Now, I mentioned the 91 cases that we have documented, but Ndondeza's work is not really a statistical effort, but it's partly to document information on the victim, and it's to build a file starting from the arrest or when the family realizes that the person has disappeared. So we systematically try to record everything that has happened since the arrest. As you see, we've documented 91 cases. But more than 300 cases have been sent to us by families since April 2016. And according to other organizations, there may be between 300 and 900 disappearances since April 2015.
Keeping this kind of detailed record of specific incidents could serve to be an incentive to people who might engage in this kind of human rights abuse to not do so because they face future potential punishment? Could it have that role?
Oui, tout à fait.
Absolutely. We already have heard some rumors from the intelligence or the Secret Service and the police. We've heard the rumors that some individuals have refused to participate in certain crimes because they're afraid that we're going to name them in our Ndondeza campaign. We also have noticed that in 2018, we have noticed that the ways that these abuses are being committed are more and more secretive. Previously, in the last 3 years, the police and Secret Service would just waltz into families and in front of everyone, they would arrest people. But in 2018, they refined their methods. Today, they call the victim and lure them into deserted areas. And so families realize that the person has disappeared but hasn't seen them be arrested. So that causes us to believe that they're afraid of us in our campaign.
For another 7 minutes.
Monsieur Picard, did you want to go first?
Go start first, I'll finish if you have some time.
Merci pour la.
Thank you very much to the witnesses.
To the committee. My first question will be to the first witness, Armel. I wanted to ask you you talked about the human rights violations and kidnappings in your testimony. I wanted to ask you the role of the AU and have they been a vital role within Burundi in helping alleviate some of these human rights abuses? Would be the first question to Armel.
Oui.
I'll repeat again.
Okay. Et concernant...
Concerning the AU, it hasn't done anything about the crimes that have been committed in Burundi since the crisis. Observers from the AU are in Burundi, but They have never published a report that we've seen. I don't think they've published any reports on human rights violations. And I don't think that these observers have attempted to follow up on cases of human rights abuses or to see what the police and Secret Service are doing. I don't think they ultimately have the authority necessary to document human rights violations. My next question is for Mr. Nina Haswe.
Role of the media. Have they been heavily influenced by the regime? Has there been individuals that have been imprisoned for, broadcasting certain information that maybe the regime didn't find favorable? If you can speak to the role of the media in Burundi a bit more.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Independent media have played a very important role. Especially independent radios suffered from abuses caused by the regime and its defense forces. Many of them were burned down. Since the crisis, many journalists have gone into exile. More than 60 journalists are now refugees elsewhere, most of them in countries right around Burundi. However, despite this, the press has remained very dynamic. Most information that Burundians receive today come from 2 independent, exiled radio stations. These stations make an important contribution. In Burundi, journalists are still being repressed by the regime and are still being persecuted. If a journalist speaks up about a delicate subject or to say anything bad about someone in power, a journalist can suffer terrible consequences. However, for these reasons, journalists who have remained in the country are quite timid when it comes to criticizing human rights violations. There is a newspaper is having great difficulties running because it is constantly under pressure from the regime.
Mr. Picard?
Oui, mon nom est Michel Picard.
My name is Michel Picard, and I will ask some more questions. Firstly, Mr. Nyongere, what is the risk that international interventions in Burundi may lead to more severe reprisals on the population as revenge? Can you repeat, please? To what extent would an international intervention lead to worse results for the Burundian population, given reprisals from the government? Well, I think that the international community when it comes, for example, to the peace-keeping missions in Somalia and Central African Republic, I think that the international community should send back or suspend these missions because it's the funds from these missions that are sustaining and encouraging the president, and it's encouraging him to commit these crimes against the population. I think then the international community should instead take measures to discourage this. Now I have a question for Mr. Nina Haswe. I looked at your website. Some of the names there are people affiliated with opposition parties. Others are simply mentioned by name. Are these individuals who have spoken openly about their opposition to the regime? Or is there also an issue where people are being reported to the regime? Most of the victims that we have documented in our campaign are opposition activists, members of opposition parties, such as the SML. These are individuals who have participated in demonstrations against President Nkurunziza beginning a third mandate. We have also noted that there are very few, or that rather that there are members of the official party, because they may have participated in very severe crimes. And so perhaps they've been eliminated because they were witnesses, even though they were members of the militia. And it was feared that they might bear witness to the ICC of these crimes, so they were also eliminated. Thank you very much. Now we will move to the next question.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I am going to be asking you both about the reform of defense authorities and what you think should happen. And I would start with Mr. Nyunger, please.
La forme de la défense.
Réforme de la défense les
Okay, I think we've lost the caller. I hear the interpretation though. Is that okay? I believe we've lost Mr. Nyongeri. Monsieur Nyongeri, est-ce que vous êtes sur le téléphone?
Are you on the line, Mr. Nyongere? All right, then. We'll ask Mr. Nina Haswa to answer. Regarding this question, and I'll respond on behalf of Mr. Nyongere. Well, a possible reform had been considered. I'm afraid that the line is cutting a great deal. The interpreter fears that she's missed part of the intervention. Now, the National Intelligence Service is completely Hutu. We want to rebalance the police and other forces. The ethnic balance that had been set for those forces is not being respected. So there's a problem with the ethnic different proportions of ethnic groups. And in the military, there were many murders and disappearances, and many people had to go had to leave as refugees. Now, when it comes to the Arusha Accord, it remains to be seen whether exiled military members will be able to come back and continue in their role. Because it may cause a problem if they come back and are not reintegrated into the military.
Je comprends que vous êtes là. Est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à ajouter?
Mr. Nyongre, I understand that you're back with us. Do you have something to add? I didn't hear, I'm afraid. Could you please repeat the question?
I wanted to hear about some of the ways that we could reform, or that Burundi could reform its authorities, its defense authorities in particular?
Donc, pour moi, la réforme de
For me, well, I'm thinking mainly of the army and the security services. For me, it means we really need to focus on the Arusha Accord. Given that these groups have always been used to repress part of the Burundian population. And currently, a lot of military members and police officers are exiled. And a movement is beginning to form, but it's not even mentioned in the Arusha Accord. So it's very important, in order to reform the defense services, we need to reintegrate these elements that are currently outside the country. We also need to have training in order to ensure that the military and police be professional and to ensure that they really serve the Burundian population.
We'll go to a second round, but keep it very short, to 3 minutes per person. So we could begin with Mr. Vagiscatos. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To follow from Ms. Hardcastle, this was hinted at perhaps in the question about the Defense Forces and the answer on ethnic politics that that was given, but I'd like to delve into that further. In what ways is ethnic identity being politicized at the current moment by ruling authorities, and what are the implications of that if it indeed is being politicized?
Merci. Oui, de plus en plus.
Thank you. Yes, increasingly, the defense and security forces are politicized. Some generals are here from the former rebellion. And they ultimately are the ones who are really in control of the ruling party. In many ways, they are ultimately the ones who hold real power in Burundi. Also, at the very highest levels of the army and the national police, there are only Hutus, and there are no members of the former Burundian army and police, and that's also is a severe violation of the 2000 Arusha Accord. Thirdly, the ruling party is led by a former general, and we have the feeling that these former FDD generals continue to exert influence on Burundian politics. So we are still fearing something like we experienced during the coups that we thought we had moved past. We have not entirely demilitarized. I'd like to add yes, I agree. These forces are very politicized in Burundi. Recently, temporary measures were taken by an advisory council on security which includes generals, and this body was not able to take binding measures, but since it's a group that includes generals and former FTD leaders, it acts as an executive body. That's why we feel that the Burundian regime is ultimately a military regime. And that's why the military and police are very politicized.
Thanks. I'm Kevin Sorensen, and I'm a member of Parliament from the western part of Canada. I wanted to thank you for your testimony today and for what you do, fighting for freedom and human rights in a very dangerous part. So thank you for doing what you do. Just a couple of comments and maybe a question or two. Burundi, like many countries, many such type countries, it's almost like if you control the military, you control the country. And I have a colleague who did spend some time in Burundi, and the use of child soldiers was there in Burundi at the time. He met a young 12-year-old soldier that he said had the most blank look you could ever imagine in a human being, and that young soldier admitted to killing over 25 people. And so people that would be taken out, and I'm not sure, first of all, if that is still happening with child soldiers, but at that time it was. In regards to the economy of Burundi, when you have, in some of our notes said 400,000 people displaced, and I think the comment or the number that you used was 500,000 people, that obviously disrupts the economy. And I know Germany and Pakistan and others are larger trading partners with Burundi than Canada is. We're about 7th on the list. But as far as the economy goes, when you have people displaced, that is bad, but it can also be a real negative when they come back, because now they're returning without a job, without a bank account. I'm just kind of wondering if you can give us a little bit of their state when they return. Are they coming back willingly? Are these part of the international arrests that they're promoting? And if you can just maybe give the committee a little bit of an idea in regards to the displacement and how some of the countries around are they responding in alliance with Burundi, or are they recognizing the problems there, backing off on that?
Chacun, s'il vous plaît.
We can answer each of you, please.
Monsieur Nyongere?
Je commence.
Yes, I will just start. In Burundi, with regard to refugees that are in the surrounding countries, for example, Tanzania, sometimes they find themselves sent to these countries without their consent. And that's why we are asking Canada to support the UN High Commission for Refugees with its work with the surrounding countries to try to ensure the civic security of these refugees. These refugees in Tanzania are threatened, and each day they suffer the thought that arrest is hovering over them. So we're asking Canada and the international community to work with the UN to try to guarantee the physical security of Burundian refugees. And now, Mr. Nini Hazwe, please. Regarding child soldiers, today we are very concerned by teaching hate to young children, primary school children. They even teach them to sing songs with hateful messages. And the militia teaches them these songs. And some members of the militia are young. And moreover, all children of all ages are taught these hateful beliefs. Regarding the displaced individuals, first of all, there are internal refugees that have been there for 25 years, mainly Tutsis. And then there's also refugees outside Burundi. Both of these categories of refugees, internal and external, are both threatened. Inside Burundi, they are very severely threatened. the Imbonerakure militia threatens to destroy the camps where internal refugees have been living since '93. So there's also threats on refugees in Tanzania. Security threats. Sometimes they're obliged to return to Burundi by force. Moreover, all of these refugees around Burundi are in a very precarious financial situation. And that's why we're asking help again from Canada. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Now just 3 more minutes for Ms. Hardcastle.
So the ethnic tension, could this be a factor as well in why there is inactivity or ineffectualness from the regional organizations like the East African Union or the African Union?
I think with regard to the East African community and the AU, the leaders of these communities don't have the same vision as we do about getting out of the crisis in Burundi. Because nothing has happened for the last 3 years. Nothing has happened in the negotiation or dialogue process. And there are countries that support President Nkurunziza. We find that these communities of nations don't have the same desire to allow us to get out of the crisis in Burundi. As Armel said, there's a regional aspect that we must consider. First of all, there are the militia members who had participated in the genocide in Rwanda, who are currently in Burundi. And even some attacks occurred in Rwanda very recently from Burundian individuals. So this regional aspect of the crisis hasn't been resolved. And the Burundian rebels are now in the Democratic Republic of Congo and participate in attacks. Leaders in the region. Some leaders in the region are trying to lend an ethnic aspect to the Burundian crisis that actually doesn't exist. Because the current crisis is actually political, which is simply caused by grasping for power. Because ultimately, in the regime that currently exists, there are both Hutu and Tutsi. So saying that this is an ethnic crisis is not true, but some countries in the region would like to make people believe that it is so. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, this meeting only lasts 1 hour, so I'd like to thank both Mr. Nyongere and Mr. Nina Hazwa. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Thank you for your courage.
Who have done a phenomenal job today under trying circumstances. So, merci beaucoup. And with that, and just a reminder that we will not be having...
Mesdames, Messieurs les députés,
Thank you.
pour votre engagement.
Thank you so much, each of you, for your hard work.
Reminder to the committee. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.